All right, yeah. So yeah, I'm here with Eddie. Eddie, you've been on the channel before, and yeah, you've been doing a bit of coaching with some of my guys. So yeah, I guess this is just a video just to kind of have a little chat with you about day game dating, get you a perspective on things, and yeah, just for like the guys that maybe didn't know too much about the street attraction stuff, they can find out a bit more about you. So yeah,
Sure.
so. Yeah, I mean, you've been in the game for a long time. I mean, even longer than I have. You were one of the OG guys for most people's perspective. So yeah, like for I guess for the newer guys, do you want to like introduce yourself a little bit and yeah, just say anything about you really?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Eddie, heterosexual male. Um, I've been gaming since 2005. That's when I discovered game. So I remember discovering it in October 2005. I got my hands on Neil Strauss's The Game, read that, and that just blew my mind. Not that there was much knowledge inside that book. There was probably 5 or 6 kind of actual tips, useful tips inside the book. But the power of that book came from the fact that it was like a hero's tale of a guy who was completely clueless with women, who then discovered this underground movement of pickup artists and then transformed himself into a player. So that was incredibly empowering because before that book came out, like most guys just thought that your dating life wasn't something that you could really control. It was up to the gods. So that book was just an incredibly powerful book to me because it made me realize, wow, I can actually do something about my results. I can actually go out there and have genuine impact and get hot girls rather than just kind of like hoping that a friend might introduce me to one of these female friends, So yeah, that's how I discovered it. Got into it, yeah, like I said, pretty early on. I was one of the OGs, I guess, if you want to call it that. I started off in clubs first, then I started doing approaches in the street. I started in Trafalgar Square, Leicester Square, just approaching girls that were sat or standing, going in fairly indirect. And then over time, I realized I could actually, be a bit more flirtatious. So started being a bit cheekier. Then eventually I started approaching girls that were walking as well. And back then, I remember 2005, 2006, pickup wasn't really known, in the mainstream at all. People were completely clueless. At that point, no one had even heard of negging. So people were clueless about night game, yet alone day game. So it did feel like a bit of a superpower early on because there just wasn't very much competition at all. So I kind of do miss those days. But yeah, so I've seen pickup evolve massively over the years. Back then, it was all like routines and memorizing lines. There was almost nothing said about body language, tonality, conversation skills, or anything like that. It was just about memorizing opening lines and routines. I think we're in a better spot now where there's a more of a holistic approach to this because ultimately what pickup does, it actually gets you looking in the mirror. You kind of initially you get into it because you want to get the girls, but very quickly you realize actually this is about me. It's about fixing myself. Really.
It's about your mindset, isn't it? It's about how I actually think like the way you go about this is really ultimately about the relationship with your own mind and
Yes.
how that gets projected. Because obviously your relationship internally with your own feelings, your own emotions, your own thoughts is ultimately what gets projected out into the world and how you interact with other people. And like you say, nowadays, I feel like, yeah, it is a lot. I think the emphasis, certainly like what I try to get across and a lot of the other guys, the other dating guys in the UK, is about taking a holistic approach where, you know, you're doing your best not just to do the interaction, you know, the first day game interaction as well as possible, like, but also just, you know, covering all other areas, like trying to improve your SMV as much as possible, because, you know, that's ultimately going to determine what kind of girls you're going to be going on dates with.
Exactly.
And also just other stuff as well, like when you're actually on a date with a girl, you know, the texting, you know, the whole process, even after a date, like, you know, relationship management, and also, you know, because it's really interesting, that point you made at the beginning, like, you know, in the early days it was a lot about kind of rehearsing lines and using the same line over and over and over again until it's like drilled into you. And because essentially it worked. But then, you know, there would ultimately come a time when maybe its effectiveness wouldn't be quite the same. So, you know, say the same bunch of guys are just using the same lines over and over again on Oxford Street. Eventually there's going to come a point where, like, you know, a girl's going to be like, oh, not this shit again, I've heard it all before.
For actual lines, whether it be kind of the opener, or texts, they do need to be updated every so often. When I look back at the texting guide I wrote back in 2014, I've had to revise a few bits in there because it's just a little bit dated. You know, technology changes, you know, communication styles change a little bit. You know, what was cool back then is passé now, you know, a bit cringe. So when it comes to actual lines, you really shouldn't be kind of going through textbooks from 10 years ago. It's gonna probably be a little bit dated. However, the actual foundations never date, like the core principles, much timeless, you know, being playful, being relaxed, you know, being carefree, all of those things, you know, are never going to go out of date. And what you said earlier, it's really about your relationship with yourself, how you think about things. Like tons of guys that I coach, one of their biggest issues is the fact that, you know, they feel a little bit of shame around Daygame, you know. So then obviously I addressed this, because there's no point me going into the finer details of like how to approach, what to say, if the guy doesn't feel comfortable with the actual activity, with the action itself, you know. So I try and explain it like this, essentially taking away like this negative frame that's been imposed by the mainstream, by the feminist movement and others. Essentially, the way I see Daygame is kind of simple. I don't see it as something modern at all. I see it as offline dating. Okay, it's actually just the traditional way of meeting someone. I often tell my guys that I coach, you could even, when you're speaking with the girl, you could even say like, there's a good chance this is how your parents met, face to face. Would you believe it? You know. But you know, if you feel uncomfortable about it, just tell your friends that we met on Tinder. You know, God forbid that they would find out, you know, that we met in real life. You know, wouldn't that be awful? So you can even introduce a little bit of sarcasm into it.
Cheers for watching. If you'd be interested in one-to-one coaching with me, where we'll go out in public and work on you approaching girls, or more generally with your social confidence, please visit my website ed-game.com.